Welcome back to the Green Rush. We are live like we are every Friday from 4 to 6 Eastern. With us today, Joe LaChance of Cannabis Corner and Luis Vega of Nautilus Botanicals. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us in the Green Rush.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much. Super excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know. Joe, you want to jump in and dive right in? Tell us a little bit about what you got going on.
Yeah. Well, both me and Lewis, we host the radio show on Mondays from Connecticut, broadcast live out of New Haven, and it's actually over the airwaves, as well as streaming live on Facebook. It's also streaming live on Twitch, and it's also streaming live on Pro Cannabis Media. So the show's been running for about 5 years now. We were like the first over the airwaves cannabis showed, directly related to cannabis in Connecticut. And so we kind of broke the ice there, pushed the envelope a little bit, and we've gained quite a following. And we just, every week we have a guest on, either from the local cannabis industry or from the national cannabis industry, or even we've had legislators on, we've had doctors on. And we just, for an hour, we just basically talk about cannabis. And sometimes it's very topical about what laws are being passed and regulatory stuff and things like that that are specific to Connecticut. But other times we get a little deeper and, as to the future of the industry as a whole. So we'd like to have a variety of guests on: activists, business people, like I said, legislators, doctors, nurses, even have some scientists, authors. And it's been a great, for me anyway, learning experience. This is how I learn more and more about the plant that I didn't know before. Because a lot of these people are on the cutting edge. Like I said, they're doctors, they're working in the industry, and they're on the edge of some pretty cool research and stuff. And, almost every time I have a guest on, I would say I learned something new. I don't know if that's Lou's experience or not, but for me,
That's
it's been
totally, Joe, that's totally my experience. I feel like I'm blessed to get to meet all these amazing new people every single week. It's, I like to joke about it, but I call it our own variety hour.
right. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. That's one thing, obviously with the pandemic, we actually used to go in the studio every week. We used to travel to the radio station and do it live from studio. The pandemic has made it which made it rough and rough weather and sometimes traffic and things like that. People would get there late. Actually, the pandemic, and I don't know if you find this as well with your show, has made it a lot easier. Because now we can do it remotely. Now we can have our guests call in remotely. And it's made us able to get a few more people who we may not have been able to get before.
It's a great way to practice that remote. And, it's really made the information more accessible to everybody, I believe. So I'm super blessed to be a part of it. And I really always appreciate Joe for having me on the show. Like you said, we've been going 5 years strong. And Cannabis Corner in New Haven was kind of that breaking ground kind of thing. There were other great media shows that kind of dabbled in cannabis before us, but actually getting on the air was a huge thing for us.
Yeah,
sure. Delivery,
that was a big deal.
Delivery was a big deal too during the pandemic. That sped things up probably 10 years. But I think the adoption of people listening and the guests, I think, sped that up too, because a lot of people didn't really know how to log on. No one used Skype. It just wasn't, kind of in the lexicon. It wasn't something that you do it in person. And the pandemic really forced everyone to not only view it, accept it, adopt it. But like you said, Joe, it really kind of expanded everybody's ability to get people, because it didn't really require you to be in person. Pro Cannabis Media has been around for half a decade. The Talking Hedge has been around for 5 years. A lot's changed. Like, not necessarily your style, but like, how do you think your reporting has changed over the last half decade? Like what's different in the industry? Is it the same thing it was 5 years ago, or
No. I mean, the show was initially basically started to help further the cause of legalization in Connecticut. So, we really focused a lot on activism. We used to have another co-host, Kebra Smith Bolden, who is a very, well-known in the cannabis industry. And all three of us were basically activists. And we wanted to use it kind of to be the voice of the Connecticut cannabis industry. So people could come there and know what's going on with legalization. So people could come there and know what's going on in the state, even as far as the legalization of hemp, as far as what's going on with CBD regulation. We just felt like it would be a great information source while that process was going on. Now
It
here we
was a great time, Joe, and it really has been. And it was a place that where activists, education people, professionals can all come together and meet. It became a meeting grounds and a neutral space for legislators, and activists. We've watched the show develop over the last 5 years. We've hit all the trials and tribulations, and now we're really excited about being able to move into the next space. We have partners like Pro Cannabis Media, New Haven Independent. We have Harry the Brave, who works with us, and we have a lot of great friends that we've been able to build off of this. And with that, we've seen the journey from activist, entrepreneur, traveling men, a whole bunch of really cool things. Because during this time, Joe ran a store. I had my business. We were able to, help promote other people's businesses and activities and events. And we watched the market mature over the last 5 years in our local area, get insight from people outside of our area, and really make friends through the airways. Because, we talk about podcasts, radios, and social media and internet media and everything else. And they become the meeting place, I guess, as we travel. We are lucky enough in our local area to have our radio show played in like City Hall. So you can, if you walk in while our show's on the public access network, it's playing in City Hall. And at any given moment, you hear people talking about weed in City Hall and government buildings, and it's still pretty cool. So we're really excited to be here today, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah, when going back to the pandemic, I think another thing that actually helped our viewership was the pandemic, because now people were home. You know what I mean? And instead of being at work or maybe in their cars, and again, that was the whole point of getting it on terrestrial radio, was the fact that you never know who could flip it on by accident. Somebody flipping through the stations in New Haven, and what's this? And they're talking about weed. And it was really all about breaking the stigma, making it something that could be spoken of over terrestrial radio. And, obviously, my goal would be to take it to another level, onto a bigger station. Maybe Sirius Radio, maybe, get some syndication going. It's time for cannabis to have a show like that. I mean, if you go on YouTube, you see all these political shows and conspiracy shows, and you see,
that's our goal. And I know that's your guys' goal too. That's something that we're all working towards, and we're super excited to be part of this. You guys have a great show. We pop in, we listen. This is pretty cool. This Pro Cannabis Media is a great avenue, and you guys are sharing a ton of knowledge. What are some of the other things you guys got on floating around?
You guys got a bunch of shows on there too. Yeah. I mean, we're both in the same business here.
Absolutely.
So you got.
I actually enjoy when your show pops on, just because it's something different and it brings a little bit of a change to the network, and it's interesting. It's educational, like you said. I actually enjoy it. I was going to ask you real quick before I answer that, who's one of your favorite guests that you've had? Because you had 5 years. It's a lot of guests. So just somebody that's been interesting. I don't even have to be your favorite, but somebody that you just find like interesting, funny, something.
I know who my favorite guest is. And it's Rick Naya.
I have to say Rick is probably one of my favorite guests as well. He is a spitfire individual. And if you're in the Northeast, Rick Naya is for the listeners out there, if you don't know who he is, go ahead and follow him. he's like the great grandfather of cannabis. He is Grandpa Cannabis, the hype man of hype mans. And if you
Yeah.
ever need somebody to share a very passionate post or very passionate feeling about something, that guy right there, he will pull your heartstrings and give you a little tear jerk. I know that he won a co-award for like cannabis a media something of the year last year with NECAN. He wins a ton of great awards. But yeah, met Rick Naya is one of the liveliest guests you can imagine. Joe, I'm so happy you brought him up. He's a good friend, and he's definitely one of my favorite guests to have on. For socially. And
Yeah,
then we have some
and it's
great
always a good
educational
time.
guests.
We laugh. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah, then we have some great educational guests. One of my favorite is Jason Ortiz. He's the the executive director of Students for Responsible Drug Policy
Yeah.
Program. And he brings a world of knowledge on the federal policy level for mushrooms, psilocybin, cannabis. And this is something that's not local now. So we got Rick, who's a Northeast local guy. And then we have Jason, who is like a large policy guy throughout the nation. He's actually the keynote speaker at an upcoming convention. So we're really excited about our friends growing in the space as well.
Yeah, Jason we all came up together, which is really nice. And it's nice to see him moving things into a national level now. And he's really training the next generation of activists through SSDP, because he's going right to the college students and showing them. And Jason is a fierce activist. He has no problem going
activist, businessman,
ground
level.
No what,
let's remember, cannabis is a great plant that's going to be able to do amazing things and really push forward and hammer it down. But I definitely want to make sure everybody's got there what they got. What are some of your other questions, brother?
Oh, well, I saw that you were in the food service industry, so I was just going to ask you a little bit about that because I wanted to see how you relate that to the cannabis industry. So,
oh man, did we have fun doing that stuff, Joe? You remember back in the day when we started mixing the parties, and that was kind of the first come up. We're talking 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I guess it relates a lot to what happened during COVID. And we've had a couple of these conversations. Joe, how many people from the hospitality food service industry really switched over during COVID to the cannabis industry?
Yeah.
We saw people bouncing from where we'd have full restaurants or dining service or food trucks or any of that stuff. We're now seeing those individuals move right into cannabis. And I have to say, the hospitality industry and cannabis has always gone together. This is not something that's new. Weed and food.
Yeah, right. Who's hasn't made pop brownies, right?
I graduated the restaurant school of Philadelphia in the year 2000. I was literally making brownies in 2000 and selling them back then. So I've been doing it a little time, but yeah.
There you go.
I went to the culinary school. I was a chef. My last chef job and my last job ever was for the NFL. And I said it was the last job I'd ever clock in and out of. And that was a few years back. And I held to that. And yeah, I got to cook for everybody that does shows for the NFL films. It was an amazing job, incredible job. Worked for Steve Sable. The guy was awesome. I mean, that guy was incredible, and met some awesome people there. But yeah, I was a chef, so I know exactly what you mean when you say the hospitality industry and cannabis, because they go hand in hand. My whole life was
the last industry that'll ever have drug testing. If there's a union
That's
or
right.
otherwise, like they'll never test for cannabis.
That and the entertainment industry will never.
no. Hold on,
testing.
wait. I will tell you one crazy story. Probably won't even tell this, but who cares? But the only
Those
drug
names
test
are
I
real names.
so ready, the only drug test I've ever found in my entire life, I got a job at a major casino down in AC to basically be an executive and run one of the major restaurants down there. And casinos actually hair test you, whether you're a culinary, security, it doesn't matter. And at the time, they were having issues. So it was going back and forth. And they told me, look, this job might take a couple months. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. So I smoke anyway. I don't care. And I was just going to take one of the things. Well, I found out I go to Colorado. I come back. They call me up like a week later. Like, yeah, you come in. You got to get your hair test. I'm like, a hair test for a chef job? And they're like, yeah, well, it's a casino. We have to. And I'm like, all right, we'll see what happens.
And then it didn't.
I bought this stuff to put in my hair. It didn't work. And yeah, it was the only test I ever found. And I literally had worked there already. They had hired me and I was working there for a couple of weeks and it was going great. And then I was in the middle of a shift and they come up to me and they're like, apparently there was a problem with like your testing. I'm like, what test? Like just acting like I didn't know, but I had already known because the testing company called me and told me. And so I was aware. And I was like, what are you talking about? And they were just like, oh, yeah, you're going to have to leave. And I'm like, whatever. I really didn't care. It actually was kind of a blessing because it opened up a bunch of businesses to me. Like literally a month or two later, I started an entire business and it
Oh yeah.
my life way better. So, and that's a pretty far drive for a job from me. So it all works out for a reason, but it's a crazy story because,
But
like
at
I
the
said,
time, you think it's like the world is ending. Like I was engaged after 6 years with this chick. I failed a drug test. Our relationship was over. I basically for the same reason. And it was like the best thing ever. I thought my world was ending, you know, and then like in hindsight, you're like, damn, I'm really glad I didn't get that job, and I'm really glad I didn't get married because I'd be divorced, you know.
it's
Yeah.
funny.
Wow.
There you go.
That's funny you say that because I said I was like upset about the job because, like I said, I had worked there for a few weeks already and it was going great. I was getting like I was entitled to bonuses and all this crazy stuff, and I was just like, "Well, this will be cool." And then they popped me with that. I'm like, "Well, that ended quick, but whatever." I was mad
You
for
know.
like a week, and then I was like, "Ah, whatever. Who cares? That shit happens." I
Yeah.
wasn't
And
worried
you know
about
what's
Yeah.
interesting about drug testing and all that stuff, right? This is for weed, right?
Mhm.
But
Right.
yet, how much alcoholism is in the restaurant and the food and the casino industry? How
Oh
much
my God.
opioid abuse is in the in those
Well,
industries?
it's
You
funny, Joe.
know,
I worked in banking, right? But I had to take a drug test to get into banking, and they called it 3 martini lunch. So they know you're going and getting wasted, and they did. They brought me. I bought 3 martinis. I got absolutely hammered, and they're like, just don't talk to any clients for the rest of the day. And it was like, then on our quarterly, meeting, when all of the banks would get together and hand out awards and do their BS, it would be the head teller would make margaritas. She had a blender, she had tequila in her top drawer, and that's how they rolled. I'm not going to name names, but I know people that would go into the safe and have a cocaine in the safe deposit box and snort a little cocaine down there, and they want to have an issue like that. My buddy that was a banker next to me peed for me so I could get promoted out of there.
Right.
So like luckily he did that for me and I got the next job. But it's all that stuff is stupid because like you said, is water soluble for the worst drugs out there. You can't really test for alcohol or cocaine, but you want
unless
to
you
test for
catch it
something.
right away, you know.
Yeah, get out of
within
here.
like a couple hours with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
most people,
crazy.
you know, they sleep it off. They come into work hungover, but they're not. Maybe they are
We
still
didn't
drunk.
even sleep, Joe. Like we would be up all night till 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and come in. Man, I'll tell you a story because I don't even care anymore. This is really bad. I don't drink anymore, and this is one of the reasons why. Like dirty martinis are the devil. I went out one time and got wasted with my coworkers, and then at like 2 in the morning, I didn't want to take an hour ferry ride and go back and then come back the next morning. So I literally slept in the lobby on the couch. I woke up at like 5 in the morning and it was like a yard sale. My shoes were over there, my shirt was over here. Luckily no one came in. The Smurfs were playing on TV, which I can't even begin to tell you how trippy that is when you're still drunk and you wake up and the Smurfs are playing and they're giving you some life lesson and you're like, I'm not ready for this, I'm not ready for you, go away, Smurf. I just like nobody, like that's just how we rolled back then, and that was at a
Right.
bank, man. These are like bankers, like you're trusting them with your money and your
Money.
finance and stuff, and they're out getting hammered, like just to get the stress out of the way. Wouldn't you want them a little puff away and come in sober? But that's not how it works, man. I know my wife works at Amazon. I'm not going to tell you about those stories.
Those
Really, they
yeah,
must be strict, huh?
crazy, man. It is absolutely crazy what people
They
go through.
create alcoholics, bro. Like,
Yeah. And we talk about this and we see it in all the professions. And whatever profession people are in, they tell you all the time, especially with drug tests, oh, just cocaine's out of your system in a couple hours, in 3 days. The weekend drug. You can do it all day, Friday, Saturday, get drug tested on Tuesday. And it's tough because cannabis stays in your system for such a long time. Like if I were to ever be like when I get my blood type is sour kush. I don't know what else to tell you. There's never a question. They're like, we're gonna get drug tested. I was like, I am going to fail that. I'm not even gonna try anymore, bro.
But before you move on to that, we all need to imbibe so that we failed the next drug test, because it is 4:20 somewhere. So we're gonna take a quick break. We're all gonna imbibe. We're gonna come back in a couple minutes. So all y'all puff puff pass. Don't fuck up the rules. We'll be right back.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Sativa Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Sativa understands the importance for accurate, on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Sativa Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com.
All right, welcome back. We got our guests back with us, Luis Vega, Joe LaChance, back with us talking about Cannabis Corner. Joe, you were talking about before recording, talking about you being in Puerto Rico. So what brought you down there? Because obviously Connecticut is your scene, but you are in the Caribbean. Why? What's up?
Well, I guess it's always been a dream of mine to retire, let's say, in the Caribbean, right? Now, I'm no young kid anymore. I turned 63 last year. I'm turning 64 this year. And I had wanted to do this for quite a while. I had visited this island a couple times, and I really fell in love with it. And like I said, it's been a dream of mine since I was, say, in my mid-30s to retire on a Caribbean island. And I found this place. I liked it. It had a lot of good qualities. The fact that it's still a part of the U.S., the fact that they're using the U.S. dollar, you don't have to have a passport, all that kind of stuff. Plus, it's beautiful. So when the pandemic hit, I had to close my store and my little coffee shop that I had and my medical marijuana business. We had a CBD shop that I ran with my brother. We had to close that. So I had nothing going on. And I said, you know what? And legalization was on the cusp of happening. I said, you know what? It's now or never. This is the time. I have time. I'm not doing anything. I have to start over again once this thing is over. And who knew how long it was going to be? I said, now's the time. So I took that lockdown time and I took all that downtime and I just started packing up my life, putting money together and getting ready to do it. And I've been here full time probably about a year. At first, I would go down here for a couple months, then go back up there, just to get things, with the legalization. When legalization happened in 2021, because of the pandemic, all the hearings and everything were done remotely anyway. So it allowed me to still stay active through the radio show, through being able to testify virtually. And once legalization came in, I just felt such a sigh of relief.
And just to clarify, you're talking about the regulation of Connecticut, not Puerto Rico.
Connecticut, yeah. Yeah, Connecticut. I knew I made the right decision, Like I said, I'm not a young kid anymore. I'm 63 years old. It was a 7-year battle to get legalization put in Connecticut. And there were some times where there were some really difficult periods through that. And I was very stressed out. My health wasn't doing so well. And I just felt it was the right time. And I really love it down here. There's a lot less stress. There's a lot less hustle bustle. Again, because not only do I live in Puerto Rico, I live on a little sub-island, Puerto Rico, called Vieques. You actually have to take a plane or a ferry to get to the mainland Puerto Rico. So this place is like a time capsule here. We have medical marijuana in Puerto Rico, and they have a very good program. I would say their medical marijuana program is better than Connecticut's. They have a very good program. They're good quality. They set up the laws so it has to be Puerto Rican owned. So you don't have a lot of MSOs down here. You don't have any MSOs down here. So it's so calm, so peaceful here that that's why I live here, man.
So that's actually how I started my podcast, was because I went down to Puerto Rico. I heard about what was Act 20 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Tried to talk to some people, CBD companies, saying, hey, if you want to avoid, some of the wrap up and failures and whatever, you might want to get down there and take advantage of that, because it's literally adding 20% to your bottom line, right, by moving down there. And people just didn't care, didn't want to hear it. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to start my own podcast and talk about business stuff and nerd out on my own topics. So it's fascinating that you actually are going down there and still in the industry and seeing it. Have you noticed any backlash though on what's called now Act 60? A lot of crypto folks down there. Both Doug and I are investors during the day, and
as was Lou.
Yeah. Okay. So you've seen plenty of going on with the crypto market. Is there some backlash locally with all the people moving in there?
Yep. Very much so. Not so much on my island, because the people here really don't get up and protest. It's kind of almost like, like I said, a little time capsule here. But Brock Pierce, you all know who he is, right? The big crypto investor billionaire, did buy a big property here on my island. He has bought a ton of property on the main island. He's one of the guys who came down here and took advantage of that law, you know, the 4% tax law. And yeah, there's a lot of backlash. When he comes to town, people protest. There have been protests. They're calling it the second colonization of Puerto Rico. The people here.
I've heard that. I find it interesting too, because he bought a hotel that was a waterfront that was destroyed by Hurricane
That's
Maria.
the one he bought here, the
Yeah.
W Hotel. Yeah, he
Right.
bought that here on this island.
And no one was doing anything with it, Joe, and yet they're going to complain when somebody from an outside comes in and actually fixes it up. So I don't get it. But maybe
Well,
that's
here's the problem. He still hasn't done anything with it. So the people are saying, what is this, a tax shelter, whatever.
Fair
And
enough.
you know what happened with the crypto market. So when he bought it,
Rican, so as a Puerto Rican,
there you go. Luis is Puerto Rican.
So I also did go down and take advantage of the 4% tax, and I have a couple of friends who did that as well as native Puerto Ricans with mainland businesses, and I did that at the end of my CBD transitioning into my adult use. A big part of that is so that I can give back to my community because I'm able to take 10% of what I would have paid in taxes and reinvest it into my local communities in Puerto Rico and up here. But then you take it one step further. The biggest reason for the issues with like the purchase of the W is they're going to privatize. They're going to very much try to privatize the coastline that's attached to the hotel. And in Puerto Rico, all beaches are public spaces. So even if you buy a beachfront property, the beachfront of that property still has to be accessible by the public.
Right.
So easements come into play. And usually when you buy a nice property like that, you don't want your high-end guests bothered by
locals.
And by law, you have to have that. So what companies are doing when you buy large properties like that, they don't do anything to the property. They allow the property value to continue to drop, allow the properties around them to fail, and then they buy up more of the land, privatizing the public assets there. So now the people that were there, and this is happening in Hawaii as well, and a lot of times we don't have individuals that have now made it part of their business plan to work like I'm going to sound super Puerto Rican, the colonizing people that are coming in to take over our space, because there aren't very many native Latino Puerto Ricans that can actually take advantage of these same tax acts. So, you know what I mean? We see when Logan Paul and the Paul brothers were chastising Bad Bunny for taking advantage of the same tax acts that they're taking advantage of, but we're native Puerto Ricans. This is for our culture. This is for our island. So if you're going to come in and kind of do it as an investor, I would look for the same community host agreements that they're forcing on the cannabis industry when they move over there. You know what I mean? So like if you're going to buy one of these large places, you should have some type of commitment to the community and the environment.
To give money back in. Right.
Yeah, that should be a no-brainer. Me and my wife have talked about that too. We're looking at Puerto Rico going in, and we would put 100% of our savings back into the community. And by that, I mean buying a like Rick Steves. He's a travel guy, right? And so he lives here in Seattle. He went and bought an apartment complex in North Seattle and then gave really, really cheap rent to single moms. I would do the same thing. I'd make my investments kind of philanthropic, but I would invest 100% of my savings into the community. And I think other people should do that as well. It only makes sense, to double down on your investment, but to do some good with it. Do you guys feel like that's going to be a game changer for the companies that do move down there? Because I've said that 85% of CBD companies, for example, will fail unless they have a Puerto Rican entity. Is that hyperbole, or would you agree with that?
It's a good tax strategy. Now, here's the thing. The reason that there's so much pushback is because they feel like the people who do come down here and take advantage of the tax bill are not putting back into the community. So they're just taking, whereas they could take some of that money and build a community center for the city that they're wherever. And they're also taking these properties, turning them into high rise, raising the rents real high. So now there's no housing for locals as well. So like what you said, making a building for single mothers. If they came down here, invested, put together, in some property and then offered it to locals for a lower rent, if they would add more to the community, then I think they would be more accepted. But
Me and Joe go back and forth about this all the time because, I'm also an entrepreneur. I understand all of that. And I love where you're saying you put 100% of everything. It's a sound business decision. And that's what's going to make a lot of companies more successful. Like you said, 80 something percent of companies that don't have a Puerto Rican entity are going to, it's hard. They might go under because they don't have that 20% buffer. You know what I mean? So if it costs you 10% of what you would have saved to set your entity up and have that up, then now you're saving still 10% over the grand scale. And say you invest that 10%, which could be $100,000. It could be a savings of $100,000.
Right.
And say you put that into that local community in some way of just electricity for the 5-block radius of where your business is, so that you don't ever lose electricity. But now the local people around you are able to have a solid electrical base, and now they become favorable to you. You know what I mean? That's one thing that a lot of people are not looking into, and how can I make my local community better, not just for the people, but for my business as well, and be a great civic partner. So if it means raising infrastructure on a 5-block radius and it might cost me $100,000, I'm not counting on the government to do it. So I'm not counting on the town to use my tax money to do it. I'm going to do it. So I save that tax money myself. I'm going to make sure that the people are taken care of, because then they're going to want to shop with me, and I'm saving this money anyway. So now I'm not spending anything extra, but I'm getting some great PR with it, and my karma's good.
And it's a tax write-off because you're putting it into something.
Exactly. The whole name of the game is taxes, baby.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that they have all these pharmaceutical company facilities from the 80s that were CPG and ISO certified and everything. So there's opportunities down there. Bilingual, and I've always said, bilingual call center would be a great opportunity to set up down there.
Yep.
And I don't think the terroir is terrible. You can train them, and there's a lot of agricultural opportunities. But do you think ultimately with the storm, the hurricane season, the salt water, do you think that Puerto Rico, I know that Southwest grows coffee, right? There's a mountain chain there that kind of blocks everything. That's where the coffee comes from. Is that the only place that's suitable?
No.
Or what's the probability that Puerto Rico could actually grow, or is it only going to be a processing facility, or what's you guys?
Well, here's the deal, and this is why they're so against colonization. Go ahead, Lou.
So the growth, we did sugarcane there. We did so many different things that so agriculture is the cornerstone of what we do. We can't even export as much agriculture as we would be able to take in. You know what I mean? We don't necessarily have food scarcities because you can reach up and grab fruit. We grow cow, we grow pig, so we have all of that in place. And cannabis is a great crop. There's hemp that's being grown outside. There's cannabis that's able to be grown. It's really interesting to see the agricultural methods that people are employing to grow this crop. Cannabis is one of those things that could, a couple lights and some fans usually. It's interesting because not only cannabis is a crop, but we grow tobacco in Puerto Rico as well. We grow tobacco in Cuba. And that's a crop that's very much comparable to growing cannabis. They still use field fans. They use field lights for other crops, other words, and cannabis is just the same. The way we grow it outdoors is you have a field light that you would put on for an hour before sunrise and an hour after sunset. You're good on your light cycles. And then when you want to flower, it would flower naturally through the light cycle. You just turn those lights off.
Right.
To keep moisture and mildew down is just field fans like you would with any other ground crop. And so the Puerto Rican people are known to how to grow this plant, so much so that when indentured servitude and field work was going on in the 40s and 50s, the Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans, Dominicans, and Cubans were imported from the Caribbean to grow these crops in the U.S. So there's a ton of history that aren't even known about. You know what I mean?
The land here is very amicable to growing. And like Lou said, if you go back in the history of Puerto Rico, this used to be an agricultural island. The Spaniards definitely knew how to utilize and take advantage of what was here naturally. When the US came in, it was a whole different story. They saw it as a military stronghold. So the whole sugarcane industry that was here moved out. They took it out and brought it over to Hawaii. And it was a thriving industry here. Same with the coffee. And then they instituted this thing, it's called the Jones Act, which means that you can't import directly from other countries here. You have to, everything that comes here has to come from US soil, has to touch US soil. So basically it has to come from US distributors.
But not only that, it has to come from Jacksonville. There's only one port in the entire world where everything has to come from.
Yeah. And it comes here. So it makes things very more expensive when realistically, again, you talked about Big Pharma coming in here. They took up a lot of that agricultural farmland and built big factories down here. And then I don't know if you know that the farm industry moved out of here and went over to China. And a lot of those big factories are now weed grow houses. So, I mean, at least they were repurposed for the medical marijuana industry. But yes, this island could definitely almost be self-sustaining if they would think that way, if maybe they could get out from under the US thumb, because you have agriculture, like Lou said, you got farming here. You could, and again, that used to be a big industry here, not so much anymore. But if you could get the mentality and bring all that back and then add hemp in as a major crop, this island could be self-sustaining because you certainly have enough sun to do solar. It has its own water source. We have our own rainforest, and the water is supplied, and it's nearly endless, and it's beautiful fresh water. So we have all the materials here. It could be a self-sustaining island if it would just be able to go in that direction.
Lou, would you recommend that American-based businesses move, their operations to Puerto Rico, knowing that there's some backlash and racism claims and some frustration from locals and the high prices that everyone in the world is feeling with fiat inflation? Would you recommend people move there? And if so, how should people do that appropriately?
As a native Puerto Rican, I don't want anybody else to move there. They can.
I say that too, man. Seattle, I'm in California, stay home. I don't move here.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only people I want here are my friends, man. And most of my friends are native Puerto Ricans. So
I just want to keep it a secret. Because it's so special that it's like, I just want to keep it a secret, because as long as we are part of the US, those it's a tax haven. It is, if you're able to do it, if you can take 6 months and just go live on the island and experience it and actually find the love for the island.
Real quick, because we keep talking about this, but we haven't explained why. So real quick, why it's a tax haven is because you can't have taxation without representation, and there's no senators or government representation, and so therefore there's no tax. So that's why. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's no federal tax. Along with that comes there's no right to vote as well. Right. So as you have to establish yourself as a Puerto Rican resident to take advantage of the 4% tax. So you can vote in the Puerto Rican elections if you so choose, which can, sometimes they can be important. It's important to stay involved in your local politics because that really what affects you.
Local politics is, and that's what it is. It's all local politics with no real input or anything into the larger sector of it. And that's what the sad part is and the tough part. So yes, tax haven, because you have some great regulations for 4% tax. You're going to add 20%. You're going to add 20% to your bottom line no matter what. You know what I mean? So it's pretty interesting. So if you were being taxed at the tune of like $500,000 a year because we don't have a 280E sector, and so this just goes into why cannabis, it just makes sense if you are a cannabis company, and I would say if you were an ethical cannabis company, and would respect the space and the island, then yeah, going to the island would do worlds for you and wonders. And realistically, if you even sourced from the island, you'd save a ton of money, because now you're not even moving product, and the product is being grown on large hectares of land, and the extractions being done in C1D1 style facilities from old pharmaceutical buildings. You know what I mean? So it's a superior product with 100% American technology and American education and American. This is the next part of it. With it being a tax haven, and we're talking how much of a beautiful island, this is not a third world country, because they have all the accessibility to the U.S. So it is.
We have Walmarts
US,
here.
Yep, it's full U.S. educated individuals. You're not getting somebody who was educated at a place that wasn't recognized by federal standards of the United States. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
you're selling it loose. You're not supposed to be selling it. So
yeah, my
you gotta cut back on that sale.
Hey,
Me and Josh, I'm not gonna lie, Josh and I this week, no lie. What did we talk about, Josh?
We were talking about buying a house in Puerto Rico in 18 months.
Yeah.
Guys, I'll let you in on a little secret. I have a place for you to stay if you ever want to visit. Just
there you go.
Hey, I'm curious, do you guys ever laugh at anyone when you see them on LinkedIn or any social media and they're talking about going to Jamaica? Do you guys ever? I think it's a meme. I think it's hilarious. Those are the people that I just put on a list of, like, flag them and anyone who ever gave them money, because they have no idea what's going on. You ever laugh at them, or do you just say good luck?
I say good luck. I shake my head a little bit.
Jamaica has changed the rules a little bit, though. We actually, Lou, we had a guest on who a couple weeks ago who is in Jamaica right now.
I mean, more investment side. That's what.
Forget it.
When you compare it to the opportunities in Puerto Rico, why in the world would you ever look at Jamaica?
Yeah, no, the opportunities are not there. They have a very small medical program, and it just got in.
Right, and the money doesn't go exactly where it needs to. There's always a lot of greasing of the wheels when you go international.
Yeah, people. I mean, I don't think people understand that Puerto Rico has the infrastructure and enough dispensaries and enough growers to go legal right now.
Oh yeah, there's
more than
in San Juan, there's a dispensary on every other block. Not
what they need is more patience.
There's a ton of patience, and very tourism friendly. It's $25 to get yourself a temporary medical card for reciprocity for flower. If not, if you have a card from any place else, you can just
buy anything but flower. You can, you can get concentrates, vapes. All you need is a medical card from another state.
Is it any good, though?
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Good product.
It is all craft, great local companies. And these are people who are educated from the United States. A lot of the guys came either from New York, California.
The law. You can have an American business partner.
Right.
But you have to have a 51% owner who is Puerto Rican.
Yep.
And they don't allow MSOs here. So yeah, and I gotta say, I've been, using the medical products from Puerto Rico, and they're top, they're good quality. They're good quality stuff. So, no, they have the infrastructure to go legal now. The thing here, they do tax their medical marijuana. And we do have a high sales tax here. It's 11%. Which is high, and that's on everything. That's on, you want to go buy milk. All right. So, so we're on par there. We're close. 1 percentage point doesn't matter.
Mine's 7 here, so it's pretty close anyway.
Yeah. So they're not in a hurry to legalize it here. Because the government is already making their money off it. You know what I mean? It's not like in a lot of states where it's non-taxed. They are getting tax money from it, as well as the licensing money. And there is no fee to get your card here. You pay a fee to the doctor, and that's it. You don't pay a fee.
How come they're not making more of a big deal to make it more of a destination? It's the Caribbean. I hear more about Costa Rica, and it's not even part of the U.S. So why is Puerto Rico not kind of doubling down on its advertising and marketing and tourism and really just letting cannabis be, you know, this inviting tool instead of just ignoring it and letting Miami kind of take some of the attention away?
You
They
know,
do,
I
yeah.
think that there is a lot of information out about it, but with it still being such a taboo thing,
Yeah.
it's hard, you know, because alcohol is a huge thing out there.
Yeah, they
So
sure
as
push
you
that.
drive in, you land in San Juan, you do see that it is advertised for tourism. You can get alcohol almost any place. There's huge billboards everywhere for alcohol. Gambling is something that's up and coming now in San Juan. There are a couple very small casinos, but they're still there. It's not a huge area where you're going to sustain large casinos, but the idea of fun is very prevalent on the island. Do you know what I mean? And cannabis is growing because in most Caribbean countries that in our past, that it was very taboo. It was what evil doers did. It wasn't, you know, right for what you were doing. So now with it going legal and going heavily legal, I mean adult use, I mean medical out there, I apologize, but there's so many dispensaries, you know, like this is a large industry now. We're talking for the island, there's over 100 and something growers. You know, there's a small craft, still gray market that does home grow cultivation because homegrown isn't legal out there. But the island calls for it. And I think that the government's just not pushing it because they're under the rule of the US, where international
Federal.
can do more advertising to seek the investors, you know, because it's a country looking for it. Other than that, we're a country with no representation, so we don't really look to bring in those things other than just tourism. Tourism would be what we're looking to drive business, but investment money is
Yeah.
solely based on what the government says that they can do. Puerto Rico can't create any of its own investment rules. So
So
it's interesting.
you're saying there's that many dispensaries and there's no MSOs over there.
None.
How do the dispensaries do well? I mean, over here,
They
you guys obviously know what's going on. It's like, I mean, in New Jersey, they open up a dispensary and it doesn't do very well right now, and it's like that across the whole country. So in Puerto Rico, it sounds like it's a thriving business and it's amazing with no MSOs, and it sounds like quality product.
Right. And now there are companies that are big companies, but they're Puerto Rican owned, if you know what I'm saying. So there is a big grower called PR Med, and they're the largest grower out here, and they supply a lot of the dispensaries. Some of the dispensaries have 4 or 5 different locations of the same name. Yeah, it is amazing without MSOs. The dispensaries do well, especially the ones in San Juan. Once you get to the more outer areas, they're not as condensed as they are in the main city. But there has been, let's just say there's oversaturation a little bit, a lot too, and they're lacking patience now. There's been a
So
big
Joe,
drive to get more patience.
so what I think is the best way to describe it is the level at which people designate is successful. One
Right.
person successful is a lot different than a Puerto Rican successful. I believe
Right.
that Puerto Rican successful, as these companies are doing it, even the smaller ones are seeing that they're successful as long as they have the positive cash flow. The owner's probably making 60 to 100 grand a year. It's a big difference in what the idea of successful. We say, well,
I
in
agree. Yeah.
Jersey, successful is $1 million. Where, you know, it's $1 million a month, because successful in Connecticut is $1 million a month adult use, $10 million a month medical per dispensary.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the unit of measure, I guess we would say.
Yeah, I agree
So
with
the
Lou on that.
unit, how you would gauge success in Puerto Rico for a successful dispensary or grow or something is a lot different than what we gauge it here. I believe that
Yeah.
there's more of a focus on just being able to survive and live versus needing to be the kingpin of weed in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, that whole millionaire mentality really isn't here. I agree 100% with Lou, and it's a mentality thing. It's, you know what I mean? It really is. It's the mentality of the people here. And that's why I like the fact that the businesses are owned by Puerto Ricans. You know, you don't have a lot of US investors coming in and getting that mentality, the corporate mentality where we have to make money, and the product suffers. And Lou hit the nail right on the head. Lou hit the nail. It's a cultural thing, and their expectations are not as high. They're just happy to be running their own business.
Yeah, the rat race is definitely an American mainland thing. It's very different in Alaska, where I was born, different in Hawaii, of course. And yet it's still one of those places where it's the only place in the world as an American you can go and not be taxed. You can work anywhere else in the world, and Puerto Rico is still the only place that you're not going to be taxed at that federal level. But
St. Thomas too.
Yeah. So I think with that, we're going to have to take a break really quick. Hopefully we can come back because I want to talk to you guys about advertising and what's going on in Connecticut. So hopefully we'll be able to get you guys to come back right after this break. So again, we got Joe LaChance with Cannabis Corner and Luis Vega with Nautilus Botanicals, hopefully joining us right after this break. So stay tuned.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems. Whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it actually will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate, on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com.
All right, welcome back to the Green Rush. Again, we are live here every Friday from 4 to 6 Eastern, talking about everything that is the business of cannabis. This week, we're talking about cannabis media. Just had a really cool segment about Puerto Rico international well, not really international, but pretty much.
Yeah.
You have to watch that segment if you didn't already. Cool stuff though with Joe living down in Puerto Rico, but really covering Connecticut, a place I have absolutely no idea about. So yeah, hopefully you guys are going to be covering that on Weed Talk News, maybe a little segment that we have here coming up at the end of this show, where we have people from all over the country talking about their own local markets. Really quick, really interactive, really informative. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what's going on in Connecticut, Joe.
Well, as you know, 2021, we legalized cannabis here in Connecticut. It officially took hold the beginning of this year, January of this year. It was a long battle. It took about 7 years before they finally got a bill that they could bring to the floor and pass. So the way the system, they set it up was through a lottery. And what they did was they would give people lottery, you could buy basically a lottery ticket. But what they did was they opened it up so you could buy unlimited tickets. So what ended up, I mean, the whole process is very complicated. They came up with a very funky licensing structure. They were, giving out social equity licenses, but you had to pay for them. And MSOs could invest in people as long as they were a social equity applicant. And the qualifications for being a social equity applicant were based on geographics, not on, actual people who had been affected by the war on drugs. So the way they set up the regulatory system was very easy to game. Let's put it that way. And I don't know if you know about Connecticut's medical marijuana system, but it's basically been controlled by 4 MSOs for the last few years. Didn't start out that way, but over the last, I would say 4 or 5 years, Connecticut has been completely taken over by MSOs. And I'm talking the growers own the dispensaries as well. So it's been a pretty closed market for a while. And the way the legislator set it up was they gave those same medical growers the first rights to get into the adult use industry. So what we have now is all the existing medical dispensaries are now, mostly all of them, not all of them have converted yet, are now doing both. The same 4 growers are now supplying for the adult use market and the medical market. The products are nearly identical, and we're finding shortages now. We're finding shortages because these guys said that they could keep up with the demand, and they haven't been able to. They just haven't been able to keep up with the demand. So a lot of the new licensees, of which Lou is one, will start to come online, hopefully by the end of the summer, and we'll see a little bit more of an open market down here. But what happened in Connecticut after the first year and after the first round of licensing went through, and we saw all the problems that it had, they came to light very quickly. The fact that people were buying 2,000 lottery tickets because they were part of an MSO and they could afford them. Each ticket was $500. So the small entrepreneur who just wants to throw his $500 in there and see if he can get a license has no shot at all, because these people were just kind of rigging it. So what happened this session, which is the first session after legalization, right? Legislative session. Over 30 bills came through related to cannabis. 30 came through that were all had to be looked at by the legislator. Some very important bills. Some of them were just really bills, people just trying to get their 2 cents in. Some of them didn't make any sense at all. A lot of them fell by the wayside. But a few stood out, and a few have made it to the final process. One of which being full expungement for anybody who's been convicted of a cannabis conviction, not just a small possession, which was what the original expungement law was. It also to allow the hemp growers to get into the adult use cannabis industry, because they were shut out before. So that's a big bill that's being passed. They're also trying to change the requirements for CBD.
Hey, Joe, before you get in, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before you get into the changes on that CBD, I'm curious, with the 30 bills, why so many? Because that's abnormal. Is there an influx in the need for cash? Like, do they like, oh my God, we need some money, like, let's just take—
No, they were all mostly about to change the regulatory system, about changing the regulatory system. There were some good ones. There were some that wanted to limit the amount of lottery tickets to 1, because they saw that. They wanted to put that actually in the legislature. A lot of it was there, we still have the bipartisan battle here. A lot of the bills were put in by Republicans to try and actually stop the program dead in its tracks. So I would say at least 10 of those bills were put in by Republicans, basically as an FU, because they were pretty much kept out of the process of legalization, because we have such a heavy Democratic majority here that once the Democratic Party gets behind something, they just push it through. And so the Republicans had no say. So this was their ability to get a say. Again, most of those bills fell by the wayside. So I think they're down to probably, out of the 30, I would say 5 to 7 have made it this far down, because, we're getting to the end of the session now. So they did pare it down quite a bit, because some of them were redundant. Some of them were just legislators just trying to get their 2 cents in. An interesting bill that went through was the decriminalization of, that hasn't gone through yet, but it has made it to the final process, is the psilocybin bill. Connecticut has also been toying with psilocybin. So that's the latest frontier that we're embarking on. But I think it's important that we get our adult use program down and get a fair and equitable licensing system. We were able to get home grow in our bill, which was a huge fight. They did not
felony in Washington to grow without an MMJ.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
What's the market gonna look like once this all works out? Because I gotta be honest with you, when I think of Connecticut, the location and the size, I place it in a suburb in Chicago. Nothing against anyone from Connecticut, but that's just like what I think of. It's not like anywhere close to New York. Um,
Well, here's
so
Connecticut.
is there a room for it to grow? I mean, is there can there be a true industry there? Is it big enough?
If Okay, Connecticut, first of all, is a very corporately leaning state. Okay, we have a lot of big pharma here. Okay, we have a lot of insurance companies here. And again, I see Connecticut, and they lean towards corporations. This is why our industry is so corporate. This is why corporate cannabis and MSOs have pretty much dominated this industry and probably will continue to dominate it. If Connecticut can get a robust craft cannabis industry going, okay, because one thing that they're very high on here is the craft beer industry. They give them a lot of leeway. There was no craft beer industry here 10 years ago. Now it's a thriving industry. If they could get it to be a more craft cannabis industry, because you're right, it kind of falls into that small town feel. So where crafty type of small industries, they actually do well here. People will support local businesses that they know are homegrown in Connecticut. Like I said, the craft brewery industry is huge. You got that Pepe's Pizza. If you could get a legacy like that started here in Connecticut, I think the industry will be a lot better off. But Connecticut has an identity crisis, okay? Because you mentioned before, they're not as big as New York. They've always been seen as the little bastard stepchild of New York, right? Or Boston, right? So you got half the state that considers themselves like tri-state people who live on the lower half of the state. But you go to the upper half of the state, and they're more like Massachusetts, Boston people. So half the state loves the Yankees, the other half loves the Red Sox. So we have a definite identity crisis here as well. And there is a definite difference in income levels between the upper half of the state and the lower half of the state. So I think the best way, unless Connecticut embraces a craft cannabis model, like say Vermont has, like say Maine has, they're going to be doomed to a corporately dominated.
I've said the same thing about everybody, because the markets, when they go medical to rec, get destroyed. It's nothing but trash. And then that whole market has to deteriorate and plummet for any kind of connoisseur market to come. And if you could start that way, you'd be the first one in the country, if not the world, to do it that way. And that's the only way it works.
Do it right the first time.
Well, the good thing about Connecticut is they do have a craft cannabis grower license. So, and it's cheap. It's $2,500. The thing is, they didn't give out enough of them. And of course, the way they did it, people who don't even live in Connecticut were able to get licenses as long as they had a partner who lived in Connecticut. So, we'll see. I have some hope for, like I said, Lou got a license. Okay. And there are some other people who are activists, who know how to grow real good cannabis, who aren't corporately minded. I have some hope that they're going to put out some good product. I really do. And I have some hope for some of these new one-off dispensaries that are owned by community type people. But overall, as a whole, I think that's the only way the industry is going to survive, if you allow Connecticut people to actually get in and do it. And
what about advertising? Because that's one way of getting the word out there. So you've been doing the Cannabis Corner for half a decade. I'm curious how you're able to generate revenue. Can you advertise? And Connecticut, will they be able to advertise? Because you can't do that here in Washington. Like one day you can do it on billboards, the next day you can't. So what's the whole advertising scene with what you're doing and what you're seeing?
Cannabis, Connecticut is very restrictive on advertising. You can't have a billboard. You can't do radio ads, can't do newspaper ads. You can't do print ads. You can't buy banners on other websites. The only place you can advertise is on your own website or on your own app. You're not even allowed to do social media marketing. Some of the medical people have gotten around it. They kind of loosened the laws for medical, but they tightened it up for the adult use market. So that does not apply to ancillary businesses. So if you are a cannabis, let's say a cannabis educational, a school, you can advertise. Let's say you are a medical marijuana doctor, you can advertise. But as far as the dispensaries and the growers, they are allowed to sponsor events. That's about as much as they get. And they
sounds like the
can't
same in New
sponsor
Jersey.
any events that have alcohol in the same place. So it's very, very restrictive advertising laws here.
Yeah, like we can actually get Curaleaf as a sponsor. Like all the sports leagues let us put up a sign that says Curaleaf if we want now, because they'll give us like a couple $100. And but yeah, it's the oddest thing because we have the Curaleaf in town, so they let us advertise, but you can't advertise anywhere else. So, but they're
No.
allowed to sponsor sports teams for kids. It's so bizarre.
Isn't that's
does that make any
weird?
sense to anyone?
Yeah. No, it
Wrap
doesn't.
up this segment for us, Joe. Tell us about what some of those bills are changing. I cut you off. You were going to be talking about
Oh,
this
okay.
CBD changing bill. Tell us
Yeah,
what's going to be happening in the industry up there.
They have a bill in, and I don't know the exact specs of it, but basically what it'll do is change the requirements for full spectrum CBD and basically destroy the hemp industry here. And the second thing that they want to do is they want to get CBD allowed to be sold in dispensaries. That's another bill that's coming through. But again, because of the new regulations that they're trying to put in, it would preclude any CBD pretty much made in the state. So again, you're handing it right over to the MSOs. So in conclusion, what I see happening with a lot of these bills, they're trying to get a caregiver program put in, but the wording in the bill is just so restrictive that hardly anybody could become a caregiver. My thing is, I think what I see happening in Connecticut is exactly what you mentioned before. The medical industry is in a shambles right now. And I think Connecticut is taking its focus off the medical industry. We legalized hemp in Connecticut, and now they're putting in all kinds of laws that would pretty much decimate the hemp industry. So I'm just wondering if this is done by design in order to put all the focus on the adult use, because that's
where they're getting their tax money, right? Follow that money trail, you'll get that answer.
That's where the state is making the most money.
There's your answer.
It's very disturbing to me because the state promised that the medical program would stay intact, and it hasn't. It's suffered. The patients are suffering. The quality of medicine has gone way down. The supply is basically almost cut in half because the adult use market is being supplied by the same people. And they and that's what I see here in Connecticut.
It's getting gross. Like 2 years in a row, I've bought an ounce around 420. And last year I bought 8 ounces because I went to 20 stores on 420 and I stopped doing that after 6 years in a row.
Right.
And a couple of those ounces had spider mites. One of them had mold. This year, the 1 ounce I buy per week happened to have a spider mite in it. Like you could see it visibly, the nest. And I'm like, damn, people. Okay, so note to self and anybody who's listening, don't buy anything. You know, when you go to a gas station and the truck, the tanker is unloading and you're not supposed to get gas because they're bringing up the sediment from the bottom and you got to wait for it to settle. Same thing with this. Don't buy any cannabis from any store the week before, during, or after 420. I'm stocking up before, and for 3 weeks, I'm not doing it. That's disgusting.
Yeah, no, and you know, quality control is definitely lacking, especially with the MSOs. They're constantly getting cited, you know, they're constantly getting fines, they're constantly getting caught selling moldy products and
The
everything.
Cure Leaf in New Jersey, it's right around the corner from me. I say it almost every week on here. They've been nailed over a dozen times by the state. The state
Yep.
doesn't have a regulation in place that says that they have to do anything. All the state has to do is say, correct it, and Cure Leaf has to say, okay, and then they come back the next time. Every single time they come
Right.
back, they get hit with the same damn thing. It's amazing. Amazing. And then they just actually closed that grow facility because they had the union problem.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then they
saw
pulled
that.
their license, which I said literally 3 days before that they were going to lose their license, and boom, 2 days later it happens. And then magically on the Monday, that like 2 days later, magically the CRC reinstates their license because
Yeah.
they got a lot of political backlash for that one.
Yeah.
And that was that. They said, we'll pull our political money or you'll reinstate that license real quick. And that's how that probably went down.
And that's what I learned about when I was working on the legalization campaign, how deep their pockets go and how much they are willing to spend on lobbyists that the industry, that the activists don't have. And how much money talks, especially to the legislators, you know, and it saddens me because, like you say, it happened in New York, it happened in Jersey, it happened in Connecticut. They end up getting in the control of the industry, you know, because they have the money and they help write the laws.
The influence is unreal. The 20,000% return on investment that a lobbyist can get is unmatched by any vote you could ever imagine. And yet we're not going to see much change until the system collapses in on itself, because nobody wants that trash. So unfortunately, we're going to have to live through it. I don't think your market in Connecticut is going to be any different than what I've seen in the last 10 years in Washington, New Jersey, and everywhere else is going to, Massachusetts. They're all go through the same system, unfortunately.
I think Massachusetts is starting right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating watching it happen, but my hope is that at the end of that, the phoenix will rise, and that's the connoisseurs, and
California's another one. California's, and you would think
smashed.
that would be the #1 industry in the country, right? That's like where it all started. And look at their industry; it's in a shambles.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's obviously driving out. But the infrastructure is there, kind of like we mentioned in the last segment with Puerto Rico. The infrastructure is being built by these terrible MSOs that won't live very much longer. And then connoisseurs will rise.
Yeah.
And then we'll have to talk about
Can't
that
wait.
on the podcast. But I think with that, we're going to have to roll this one up. So definitely want to thank our guest, Joe LaChance of Cannabis Corner, talking all about Connecticut from the Caribbean. Appreciate you being on with us live here at Green Rush. Appreciate all your insights and everything. We'll have to have you back on.
Absolutely. And I hope to see you guys down here soon. Thank you.
Yeah, dude, I'm going to take you up on that for sure. So
you got my
For
contact.
sure, we're taking you up.
Yeah, man. Come on. I love having visitors. I love it.
All right. Well, Doug, me, Josh, I'm out of here. There's going to be another segment, so don't go anywhere. Come back next Friday, 4 to 6 Eastern. We're always here talking about something random, always about cannabis, though. But until then, talk to you guys later.
Take care.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weejit's filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it could make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com. Coming up on We Talk News this week.
In a few moments, I will also sign historic cannabis reform legislation in the state of Maryland to ensure that the rollout of recreational cannabis in our state drives opportunity in an equitable way.
Starting on July 1st, Maryland will join 21 other states with a legal adult use market for cannabis. U.S. tax revenues generated by legal cannabis sales for 2022 actually declined for the first time. Is that another doom and gloom sign?
Plus, the U.S. Secret Service eases its restrictions on past cannabis use for applicants, and cannabis sales in Vermont hit an all-time high. All that, plus coast-to-coast cannabis news reports on We Talk News with Elena Pinto. Next.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to We Talk News for this week. I'm Elena Pinto. Safe banking continues to gain momentum in the U.S. Senate, with a bipartisan group trying to get the bill in front of the Senate Banking Committee as soon as possible. We all know that soon in Cannabis Standard Time could be next week or next year. And that's why we enjoy hearing from our DC correspondent, Andrew Beringer, who is right in the middle of that area while also reporting on Maryland. And that's where their governor signed their adult use sales bill into law this week. So here's Andrew's report from the DC area.
Well, it's official. The governor of Maryland has officially signed the bill for adult use cannabis sales in Maryland. Now, what does that mean? Let's look at the breakdown. Cannabis will be taxed at 9%. Medical cannabis sales will be exempt from the tax altogether. 35% of cannabis tax revenue will go towards Community Reinvestment Fund, with counties, a public cannabis health fund, and a cannabis business assistance fund, each getting another 5%. The 5% in revenue that goes to the counties will then be divided up, with 50% going to local municipalities based on cannabis sales where those sales take place in those jurisdictions. A separate and new independent Maryland Cannabis Administration will be responsible for regulating the program. Existing medical cannabis dispensaries, which is a decent number here in Maryland, will be converted into dual licenses at the time of the legalization that takes effect. What date? July 1st, 2023, if they've paid a conversion fee. Regulators will need to start approving additional cannabis business license by July 1st, which is the indication of round 2. And when I say July 1st, I mean, of course, 2024, which would then give a full year for this new administration to figure out all the speed bumps and hiccups in the first round. Ultimately, there will be a licensing cap for regular business licenses of 300 dispensaries, 100 processors, and 75 growers. Now remember, there's two types of licenses. There's a standard license and a micro business license. Now, for instance, the standard license for a grow is up to 300,000 square feet. That is a decent size grow. Looking at micro businesses, you're looking at 10 dispensaries, 100 processors, and 100 growers. Now, example on the micro business side, a grow facility is only allowed up to 10,000 square feet. And that is the biggest difference. Tune in next week where we will have a live and much more in-depth update on the Safe Banking Act that is making its way through at the federal level. And hopefully we make some progress on it. I'm Andrew Beringer. Have a great day.
So now with 22 legal adult use states, you would think that total tax dollars generated from the billions of dollars in sales of cannabis in this country would increase year over year, but did until last year. The Marijuana Policy Project reports that while $3.77 billion was generated in tax dollars from the sale of legal cannabis in the U.S. in 2022, that was a little less than the $3.86 billion collected in 2021. Remember, legal sales began in 2014 when Colorado and Washington state were the first to legalize the sale of cannabis to adults. Since that year, a total of just over $15 billion in tax dollars has been collected. Michigan is one of the biggest markets for legal cannabis sales and checks in at number 4 behind California, Illinois, and Washington. And our Michigan correspondent, Rick Thompson, has been right in the middle of that market's challenges since the beginning. Now that state wants a state-run testing lab to alleviate the corruption that has been going on there for some time. So here's Rick's report from Michigan this week.
Hello again, everyone. This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. A Detroit news story from Tuesday dropped some new information about the ongoing federal corruption probe into Michigan's legislature and their relationship to the cannabis industry. You've heard me speculate that Greenpeace Skymint was one of the two unnamed companies accused by the feds of paying bribes to former Speaker of the House Rick Johnson during the Cannabis Licensing Board's control of the new medical marijuana business industry. Now the Detroit News has named Skymint as Company C, confirming all that we suspected of them. Greenpeace has given thousands of documents to federal investigators detailing conversations had between their principals and corrupt lobbyists and financiers. Now, this is really bad news for Jeff Radway, the ousted, ashamed former CEO. Radway is accused in several lawsuits of breaking the law or misrepresenting Skymint as being more financially stable than they actually were. One of those lawsuits comes from his soon-to-be ex-wife, who's suing for divorce, and another one from his nephew, Joe Neller. Now, Neller was a co-founder of Skymint and acted as a lobbyist for the group until he had way too much fun and was forced into rehab and bounced out of the company. Radway says his nephew owes him more than $1 million, and earlier this year sued to get it. Neller countersued, claiming Radway perpetrated fraud and misconduct. In April, just about the time Skymint bounced Radway out of their company, the two lawsuits were mysteriously dropped. I predict that neither man will emerge from this criminal investigation unscathed, because during the time of interest to the feds, Radway was throwing money around like it was candy, and Neller was the primary person dropping the money candy into special PAC funds. Skymint certainly isn't protecting either man, as their cooperation with the feds indicates somebody from their company was doing the bribey thing. Also suggested as a conspirator in the whole mess is the now defunct trade group Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association, who routinely encourage their members to contribute to the questionable slush funds which have landed Johnson and others in the federal crosshairs. Now, that group's former leader and golem of the industry, Steve Linder, has been named in several articles written about this scandal. Now, despite Skymint's lies and bribes and attacks on patients and caregivers, they are among the worst performers in the Michigan market. The company is in receivership. They owe more than $125 million to creditors. There was an eviction proceeding begun on their huge garden complex, and their purchase of the 315 chain of dispos has hit some major snags. They're also reportedly losing about $3 million per month. Now, in the corruption probe, 3 people have already pleaded guilty to the charges, and the 4th will be in court today to do the same. Now, there's another lawsuit that's captured headlines this week. The most distrusted lab in Michigan, Viridis Labs, has petitioned the judge in their ongoing lawsuit against the Cannabis Regulatory Agency to force the government to give up more documents and reports. Viridis, you'll remember, was the target of the state's largest recall of cannabis products, and a judge later determined that half of those products recalled could once again be sold. Viridis has sued the CRA, including individual employees of the state agency, claiming they acted with malicious intent when trying to punish Skymint for falsely inflating THC numbers and using an unapproved testing method to do so. Now, this is a serious lawsuit and looks to be going forward for a long time. And that's the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
The next state to vote in legal sales of cannabis might be Ohio. The coalition to regulate cannabis like alcohol has been active in that state legislature on advocacy issues, but since those elected officials have not made any progress on reform, it looks like Ohio will have to come up with 124,000 signatures before July 5th to get the adult use question on the ballot in the fall. But in the meantime, in Vermont, a new sales record for the month of February was reported by the Heady Vermont Vermont News Agency. Over $6.4 million was sold in the Green Mountain State in the middle of winter. Remember, that state was the first in the union to vote in legalization through the legislative process and not the ballot box. And that's where our green nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan, lives. And here is her Vermont report for this week, sponsored by Canatrol.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. One of, if not the biggest and best thing to come to Vermont. On Friday, May 5th in Essex, Madame Cannoli, widow to the infamous Frenchie Cannoli, and Cherry Blossom Bell, an Emerald Cannabis Cup multiple award winner, hash maker, and apprentice of Frenchie's, is hosting the Lost Art of Hashishin workshop and the movie premiere of the documentary Frenchie Dreams of Hashish in the evening. Madame is keynote speaker at this weekend's NECAN Vermont Cannabis and Hemp Convention being held on May 6th, speaking on the history of cannabis concentrates, with Bell speaking right after on the craftsmanship of solventless concentrates. NECAN Vermont is on May 6th and 7th and is the largest annual cannabis event in Vermont, 6th year running, with over 120 local and national exhibitors and over 50 speakers, including yours truly. That's the Vermont Report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
The Vermont Cannabis Report is supported by another Green Mountain business, Canatrol, winner of High Times Best Dry Cure System. Check them out at canatrols.com.
Another state that is starting to make moves towards adult use is Pennsylvania. Even though that state has had a medical program for years, a bill to open up state-run adult use cannabis dispensaries was introduced in their legislature this week. Claudia Post has more from the Keystone State.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. This is big news. Pennsylvania lawmakers have filed new bills to legalize marijuana sales through state-run stores and to provide permits for farmers and small agricultural businesses to cultivate cannabis once adult use sales are allowed. About 2 months after circulating a co-sponsorship memo for the legalization proposal, Representative David Deloso formally introduced legislation on Tuesday. The bill would allow adults 21 and older to possess, consume, cultivate, and purchase cannabis through a state store system run by the Liquor Control Board. Let me reassure you, this is going to be a disaster for adult use in Pennsylvania. That is my opinion. There are no states in the entire country that sell cannabis through the Liquor Control Board. And we are only one of 2 states that has a Liquor Control Board. Wake up, Pennsylvania. Retail cannabis sales would be taxed at 19%, and all of the revenue that would go toward the state general fund. The bill would also create a distinct regulatory scheme for industrial hemp. I can't wait for the comment period. Notably, the legislation, which has 20 initial co-sponsors, also contemplates allowing cannabis imports from other states or counties where marijuana is legal. Well, that's great because I believe in the Dormant Commerce Clause. I've spoken to you about that before. It would allow interstate commerce. It would also prohibit regulators from importing marijuana that is produced somewhere that doesn't accept exports from Pennsylvania. So it's a quid pro quo. Deloso believes permitting private companies to sell cannabis in Pennsylvania could allow large corporations to take over the cannabis industry, putting profits before the well-being of our communities. I don't want to be jaded here, but do you think that the liquor lobby had anything to do with this? Whoa. He said for these reasons, the legislation will legalize adult use cannabis through the current state store system in order to ensure the safety and integrity of cannabis sales in Pennsylvania. Okay, it's being sold by MSOs and other people. I cannot believe this. I am incensed. Former Flyers enforcer Riley Cote said the bumps and bruises and the concussions that came as a result of 51 National Hockey League fights weren't the hardest part of his job to deal with. I know Riley, he's a really good person. Feeling spiritually empty, Cote turned to parties, alcohol, prescription painkillers, and muscle relaxers to quell the emotional pain. Toward the end of his career, after reading Hemp for Health by Chris Conrad, Cote learned about the medicinal uses of cannabis. Cote used cannabis intentionally and mindfully as an alternative medicine to addictive prescription drugs. Not only did he experience cannabis as a pain management tool, but he also learned that cannabinoids like CBD can have anti-inflammatory properties in the brain. His initial interest led him to learn about the potential of psilocybin mushrooms to treat mental health issues. Cote experienced using psilocybin mushrooms at legal psychedelic therapy ceremonies in Jamaica, which is one of the focal points of a new episode of ESPN's called Peace of Mind. The episode follows a retreat run by Wake Network, a Toronto-based organization that's working further to introduce plant-based medicine with the help of clinical research. Cote assembled a group of retired professional athletes, including former Flyers wing Steve Downey and Philadelphia-born former NFL offensive lineman Justin Renfro, to attend the retreat. It was an amazing experience for all of them. It treated their depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Please look out for this special with Riley talking about the potential of psilocybin to treat mental health issues. Okay, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania from Weed Talk News. Have a fabulous week.
On the publicly traded cannabis stock front, Green Thumb Industries released their first quarter financials, and the multi-state operator did have a year-over-year increase in revenue, but did that impact their stock value? Well, who better to answer that question than our own market trader, Doug Miller from High on Wall Street.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's cannabis stock report for Weed Talk News. Maryland Governor Wes Moore, he owns $1.2 million of Green Thumb Industry stock. He was a board member, but he has since resigned, and it's been put into a blind trust, and that was announced to prevent any conflicts of interest. Well, the stock's trading around 730. It's curling up. Looks like it's about to go on a nice run, but be sure to lock in those profits. The market is crazy, and that's this week's cannabis stock report. Reporting for Weed Talk News, I'm Doug Miller.
Increases in sales, taxes, and jobs. That's been the biggest effect in Missouri since they started their adult use sales a few months ago. Month over month, growth continues to increase, and our own Brandon Jones is right in the middle of it. That is, when he's free from his Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl celebrations and NFL draft postings. Here's our Missouri report, sponsored by Baker Brands.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones with V Green Distribution with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And that's right, Missouri has passed $250 million since recreational has passed here in the last 3 months. It's been pretty crazy, and yes, we're seeing a lot of business from out of states. You might wonder, well, why are you here at a soccer stadium right now? So I'm here at the KC Current. It's going to be the only women's professional sports stadium for women's soccer in the world, built right here in Kansas City. If you didn't know, we got the World Cup coming, lots of events. So a lot of people are coming to Kansas City, Missouri, being able to check out the cannabis scene. We saw it a lot with the Super Bowl party. Everybody was coming in. Like, saw Eddie Griffin down here in downtown Kansas City getting ready to perform at Uptown Theater. And then we've also got the MMA fights that are happening tonight. And one of my close personal friends, Macmo Green, is on the card. He also works in the cannabis industry here in Missouri and has his own paper line, Wear Major Packs. So we're getting ready for the World Cup, just had the draft. Cannabis scene is being crazy. So please get down to Kansas City. And next weekend, we got a huge CannaFest down in the Ozarks. So Got the MMA fight, lots of Cinco de Mayo parties, Feel State, and Timeless is actually throwing a huge block party here in Kansas City. So if you don't know what to do on Cinco de Mayo, look down at 19th and Locust, downtown Kansas City. Go check out the Timeless block party. Everybody, get to Kansas City, get to Missouri. The cannabis scene, construction, everything is happening here. Can't wait to see everybody out here in Missouri. Again, I'm Brandon Jones with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Have a great week. Stay educated and medicated.
Brandon Jones, Missouri Cannabis Report is brought to you by Baker Brands, a curated B2B marketplace for head shops and dispensaries.
Turning to the international scene over in Europe, some countries continue to struggle to find the right path to decriminalization, if not full legalization. 2 countries actually took big steps backwards, as our European correspondent Lex Pelger tells us that Italy and France continue to be battleground countries for acceptance.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations with this week's European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And it's a busy week in Europe for cannabinoids. In Italy, the military's halted production of medical cannabis at their Florence facility. With the military being the sole producer of medical cannabis in the country, this is bad news for Italy's 50,000 patients. Reports about the cause of the stoppage vary, with some sources reporting a chronic shortage of personnel and others saying it's part of a planned upgrade. In any case, it seems unlikely that the military will produce even 100 kilograms out of the 400 kilograms of cannabis requested by the Ministry of Health. Then in France, after a long legal uncertainty, the country adopted temporary novel food regulations for CBD. This framework is designed to only be in place until the EU finally completes its own CBD regulations. However, opponents of the new framework say that the requirement of zero THC results in a functional ban of full-spectrum hemp products. The French Association of Cannabinoid Producers argued strongly against the move, saying it will shift the market to isolated CBD from the US and Eastern Europe instead of locally made hemp extracts. This move does dovetail with France's long push to ban hemp flowers and a general resistance to hemp and the cannabinoids. Meanwhile, the Czech Republic will ban CBD and other hemp-derived cannabinoids, citing EU regulations. This is an odd move from a country about to flout EU regulations by legalizing adult-use cannabis. But while the European Commission did rule in 2020 that CBD is not a narcotic and that it can be classified as a food that should enjoy the same free movement as other goods, the European Food Safety Authority has yet to complete their safety review. So the Czech Ministry of Health and Agriculture decided to ban all hemp foods and dietary supplements until that review is complete. And finally, for our quick EU snapshots, in Luxembourg, a cannabis legalization plan will soon be presented to the government. In Norway, protests lead to a functional stop of police enforcing cannabis laws. And in the UK, police have started a pilot program of giving out free cannabis vape pens to residents of public housing who are medical cannabis patients in order to cut down on complaints about the smell. That's the European Cannabis Report for this week. For more on the science side, see my newsletter on Substack, Cannabinoids and the People. I'm Lex Pelger from White Whale Creations reporting for Weed Talk News.
In one of the East Coast's newest and biggest states for the sale of adult use of cannabis, New Jersey continues to be a work in progress. Like many new states in this market, many of the limited amount of dispensaries that have been licensed are being clustered in weed-friendly towns like Mount Laurel. Now, more out-of-state operations are trying to get into the Garden State, but once again, restrictions and compliance rules are stifling the launch. Jill Goldsberry has more from the Garden State.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to We Talk News New Jersey. And here's what's happening in the Garden State. In Red Bank, New Jersey, the planning board is holding up the site plans of a local applicant. The applicant submitted their application in May 2022, and completed it in April of 2023. Crossroads LLC seeks to exist as a retail sales operation and delivery operation in an existing location where a local liquor store is currently housed, where they will partially share the space and the parking lot. Crossroads has been issued a micro license, and micro license holders have a certain set of rules that they must adhere to. A few of them being that they must have less than 10 employees, their premises needs to be less than 2,500 square feet, and it must be majority locally owned. The holdup here seems to be several concerns of Red Bank's board for their DR1 zone. The section 489022 of their ordinance needs to be satisfied, and the satisfactions include no sale of alcohol or tobacco on the premises. Of course, this is a cannabis retail shop, so we're sure that that will be satisfied. The cannabis retail entrance must have a separate entrance from the liquor store, and plant products cannot be visible from the outside. And those are just a few of the stipulations that they must adhere to, including hours of operations, which should be between 8 and 10 a.m., 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. And they must have a solid security plan, which the town has cited that they do. The town spoke to several witnesses, including the shop owner of Crossroads LLC and their architect. So this whole meeting, the whole decision is going to be reviewed again at their next meeting, and then we'll know exactly what will happen with the site, if it will gain the location and open it. Moving right along, a new dispensary has been approved for Elizabeth, New Jersey, and it's making some history at the same time. Cannabis, a retail shop opening in Elizabeth, New Jersey at 1167 East Jersey Street will be opening sometime this summer. And the shop is named Cannabis Retail, spelled CANN capital A BYS. And as I said, it's slated to open this summer. It's locally owned and operated, and it's one of the first minority-owned retail shops in town. Owner Grelinsky Charles, who is African-American, was approved during the first round of dispensary approvals in May of 2022. The shop will offer a selection, he mentioned, of concentrates, flower, tincture, topicals, pre-rolls, and accessories from various minority-owned cannabis entrepreneurs. The owners also made sure to make the dispensary a part of the community by focusing on partnering with local community organizations, such as the Last Prisoner Project and local reentry programs. For more information on this new dispensary, check out Cannabis, CANN capital A BYSS dispensary.com. And if you plan on taking your love of cannabis to Manhattan this weekend, check out the Cannabis Parade and Rally happening this Saturday, May 6th. And this is the longest running cannabis legalization event in the world. It began in 1973 and has evolved into a 3-part event. The parade down Broadway, which is a rally in Union Park, and a celebratory after party. All 3 events will be happening this Saturday on May 6th. Check out the parade downtown Broadway starting at 11 a.m. and go to their website for more information. The parade starts on the east side of Broadway between 33rd and 32nd Street, and it begins marching at 12:30. Hopefully we'll see you there. This is Jill for We Talk News. Thanks for watching, and have a great evening.
Jersey's big brother neighbor, New York, continues to have their own problems with launch and distribution of licenses. There are only 6 licensed operators in the Empire State, and the battle between the licensed and the legacy or illegal market continues to grow in public. Consumers can't tell if a storefront is legal or not in New York, and that opens up immediate conflict. The whole idea of launching a legal market for cannabis was to clean up the legacy market, and that hasn't happened. Interestingly, according to New Frontier Data, a market research firm out of California, 2 other new legal states, Arizona and Nevada, both have more legal sales than illegal sales, and Arizona just started in 2020. In Arizona, though, 55% of total sales are legal, and Arizona has 74% sold legally. So despite all the figures, New York continues to attract investors and consumers. And last week, MJ unpacked a major industry trade and investment show, made a stop in Manhattan, and Pam Schmiel has that story.
I'm Pam Schmiel, host of the Mary Jane Society podcast with the New York City Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Cannabis industry events are tricky in many states because few dispensaries are open, and the imbalance of cultivation, manufacturing, and retail licenses doesn't support the ecosystem. But the MJ Unpacked trade show in New York City last week provided a launch pad for the industry in its early days. It's a way for entrepreneurs and brands to gather, to meet, learn, and partner to ignite the industry. And the passion was high and the attitude was game on. And there's more bad news for New York regulators. Colorado company Terrapin pulls out of an agreement to build a cultivation facility in Auburn, New York, because of the state's slow rollout. And lawmakers also introduced legislation allowing farmers to sell their products directly to consumers. But dispensary owners aren't having it. They too are suffering from the state's inability to launch the cannabis industry. And lastly, cultivators are weighing whether to plant again for this year's harvest. But with few dispensaries open to sell products, makes it a risky bet. That's this week's New York City Cannabis Report. I'm Pam Schmiel from the Mary Jane Society podcast with Weed Talk News.
I'm Karen Black with Green Finger Consulting. Welcome to the Arizona Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Arizona House Bill 2489 was signed into law by Governor Katie Hobbs on April 28th. The so-called PTSD Treatment Act of 2023 means products containing MDMA that are both approved by the FDA and downscheduled by the DEA for the treatment of PTSD will be able to be legally prescribed in Arizona. The new law goes into effect January 1st, 2026. Arizona Senators Kirsten Sinema and Mark Kelly have signed on in support of the federal 2023 Safe Banking Act, the latest version of which was reintroduced to Congress April 26th with strong bipartisan support. Another Arizona cannabis testing lab has been acquired. On May 3rd, Smithers, a 98-year-old international company based in Akron, Ohio, announced the acquisition of Green Scientific Labs' 10,500 square foot facility in Phoenix. The move adds Arizona to Smithers' cannabis testing portfolio, which includes operations in Illinois, Massachusetts, and New York. Chronicon, a large marijuana-friendly festival planned for May 20th at a historic working ranch outside of Tucson, has been canceled due to a massive restructuring at sponsors Arizona Daily Star and Tucson Media Partners. All advanced ticket sales will be refunded automatically. That's it for this week's Arizona Cannabis Report. I'm Karen Black from Green Finger Consulting, reporting for Weed Talk News.
New Frontier Data released their annual report on consumer use of cannabis this week, and there were some interesting trends. For instance, did you know that there are 37% of U.S. adults who are active consumers, defined as those who use it at least once annually and plan to use it again in the future? Among those current regular consumers, 37% increased their consumption in the last year. And Amanda Ryman is the Chief Knowledge Officer for New Frontier Data. And she talked with PCM founder Jimmy Young earlier about some of the findings in this year's report.
Well, one of the things that was most interesting to me was the change in the number of consumers that exclusively consume non-flower products. So as you probably will guess, on the illicit market, flower is what is most available. And when you do have products that aren't flower, like vape pens and edibles on the illicit market, it can be tough to know if they're labeled properly, if they've been tested properly, whereas a lot of consumers feel they're a pretty good judge of whether they have good flower in front of them. So in 2022, 17% of consumers said that they were only consuming non-flower products, and that rose to 21% in 2023. So we're definitely seeing an increase in people that are not using flower at all, but instead are choosing things like edibles, beverages, topicals, and tinctures in order to get their needs met.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a good sign in that, A, we're being entrepreneurial with our approach to different products, different choices for the consumer to make, but also keeping them away from just smoking the product, which when I got my medical card in 2013, it was one of the first things I said to the bud tender was, I really am not sure I want to smoke it anymore. What are the other options?
Absolutely.
And now we're seeing more options, right?
Right. We're seeing more options, and we're also seeing the technology improve. So, one of the big Achilles heels of edibles was the onset time, right? So you take it, you don't feel it for an hour or two. It's very hard to titrate your dose. And so it lends itself to be more likely subject to overdose, right? Taking more than you intended. Now we're seeing some amazing technology in the beverage space and the edible space that is creating a fast acting product. And I think that not only does this bring more people into that product vertical, but it allows these cannabis products to be a more suitable substitute for things like alcohol, where you want to enjoy the effect in the moment.
It is all about being in the moment now, isn't it? And that applies to more than just cannabis. Anyway, now it's time for the Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. There was a significant development in the Bay State this week involving the sale of seeds and clones to consumers who want to home grow. You can now buy them directly from licensed delivery, licensed dispensaries, and licensed medical facilities. It was just 6 months ago that the US DEA announced that seeds were legal to sell because they fall under the definition of hemp. Now, of course, you still have the pressure of growing a live plant in your house, and you are limited to just 6 plants per adult, with a total of 12 per dwelling if you have 2 adults in that house. Anyway, that's the abbreviated Massachusetts Cannabis Report, sponsored by Holyoke Cannabis. I'm Jimmy Young reporting for Weed Talk News.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
One more state report for you, and it comes from Illinois. That state gets more tax revenue from cannabis than any other state in the union, except California. Illinois collected $562 million in sales tax for the year 2022. And with more from Illinois, here is Thomas Howard.
What's up, everybody? It's me, Tom. You can find me at CannabisIndustryLawyer.com, and I'm here to update you as to what happened last week in Illinois. They released how many people entered the social equity lottery for 55 dispensaries the state will be giving out later this summer. There were 2,699 entries. Which BLS region had the best odds? Well, that's interesting. It was a coin flip in Region 3, Carbondale, way at the very bottom of the state. Only 2 teams applied, so you have a 50% chance. Me and my co-host Miggy on Cannabis Legalization News. Check us out on YouTube on Sundays. We have a 9% chance of winning a dispensary in Peoria. If you applied in Chicago, you have a 1.5% chance. The most egregious applicant this time was a SE applicant, and then they just numbered them. In the St. Louis BLS region, they applied 50% of the time for those 3 licenses that are there. 85 applicants, approximately 45 of them were of this social equity person who is manipulating the lottery. They have a 91.x% chance of winning a license, because if you own half of the lottery tickets and they're going to draw it 3 times, you're very likely to walk away with at least 1 license. And I hope that we do, so I'd say vote for us, but it's a lottery, so that doesn't matter. That's what's going on in Illinois cannabis. Back to you, Elena.
And finally tonight, Trulieve, one of the largest multi-state operators in the country and the #1 dispensary in Florida, is expanding to the state of Georgia. That state legalized medical use 8 years ago, but it took until this week to grant a license to operate to Trulieve. One of those stores that is going to open now is in Macon, Georgia. And for those who know their history of classic rock, that's the home of Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, the Allman Brothers Band. It happens to be PCM founder Jimmy Young's favorite band. Your fun fact of the day. And now you can check out the Allman Brothers Museum in Macon on your tour from a medical cannabis facility in their hometown. And that's it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto, and remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it responsibly. Bye-bye. See you next time.
It's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it? Everyone is learning new ways to titrate, ingest, consume, imbibe, and engage with this plant medicine we call cannabis. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media and the host of In the Weeds, and once in a while, the really live business cannabis talk show we call Green Rush on Friday afternoons from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern. I've been a medical patient in Massachusetts for almost 10 years now. I remember my first trip to a dispensary just outside of Boston, and I told the bud tender I didn't want to smoke it anymore. So I tried edibles, then tinctures, then vaping, and now if I'm going to smoke, I only use the Weedgets filtration system. What? The Weedgets.com, Weedgets, that's weed, W-E-E-D, G-E-T-S.com, is where you'll find the planet's coolest product.
Both cool the smoke from 1300 degrees to just 90 into your lungs. Plus, the maze pipe and pre-roll filters get rid of all the gunk that you just don't want in your lungs if you can help it.
Add in the code of PCMTV and you get 15% off. So just go to Weedgets.com and check out the best way to enjoy a cooler smoke with less coughing and hacking and more peace of mind. All that resin and tar is collected in the polyurethane filters that are easy to clean with soap, water, and a few Q-tips. Your lungs will thank you, and so will I.
We are a cultivation through to consumption lifestyle brand for the cannabis industry. Of course, the crown jewel in our product line is the Armoire home grow system. So now with Green Goddess Supply, we can take you everywhere from growing it in the Armoire right through to storing it, consuming it, rolling it, storing it, you name it, A to Z. Our goal is to enable everybody and anybody anywhere to be able to produce their own organic flower quickly, easily, discreetly, and inexpensively.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
Safetiva Labs in Westfield is fast becoming the #1 testing lab for cannabis in Western Massachusetts. Safetiva understands the importance for accurate on-time test results for your product. That's why their current compliance panel turnaround time is less than 2 days. That's Safetiva Labs in Westfield. For more information, go to safetiva.com.